thank you for coming out tonight, everyone. All the attendees here. It's a rainy day, I know, and thanks for making the trek out. All our great panelists, as well as those tuning in at home. We're really excited for this panel called Level Up Your Game. We're going to talk about independent game development, what goes into it, what drives all these folks here to do what they do. Making games is very difficult. There's got a lot of different disciplines involved, such as programming, art, animation, sound, pretty much everything you can think of. And putting that together, dealing with your audience, marketing, making a product, business side, there's all kinds of aspects to it. And it's even harder when you're independent. So just a show of hands real quick, who plays video games here? Pretty much everybody. Who has played games that are classified as indie, quote unquote? Pretty much everybody. I love to see it. And then who here actively seeks out indie games to buy and purchase and keeps following indie devs? Okay, it's pretty good. I love it. So I'll be a moderator for the night. I'm Prashas Thapan, or Prash. I am the founder of Pariah Interactive. This is our studio. Welcome to our space. Yeah, as I said, the purpose of this panel is to understand the high-risk industry of indie games, what drives all these folks to do what they do, and hopefully provide a perspective on, getting us started in indie games, building something from scratch. And with that, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves one by one.
Sure. I have the microphone. Hi, my name is Laura Clark. I guess I'm primarily an academic, maybe. I'm a teacher. I do make my own games and have been primarily working on solo projects for 10 years or so. I also ran a video games gallery in Manhattan for some amount of time. It's in hibernation now, but it was called Baby Castles. I guess that's enough for me.
Hi, my name is Luna. I'm a game designer and developer here based in Brooklyn, New York. I graduated from NYU Game Center last year, currently working here at Pariah Interactive as a game developer and software programmer. So I'm mainly working on our indie game Thousand Deaths and also participating in other AR and VR projects. On the side, I have an indie project I'm doing on my own. It's a text-based narrative game that's kind of exploring the theme of censorship in art creation. That's it.
Hello, I'm Lillian. I am a co-founder of a studio called Common Opera. Call ourselves more of a games collective. I am a game designer and audio person. We're a small team, so we do the many hats kind of thing. I also wanted to give a shout out to everyone here. I've collaborated with everyone here to some capacity. I don't know if I should go into that now or later. Later, yeah, okay. So, but yeah, it's a small world, so I'm happy to be part of it.
Awesome. My name is Andrew Garahan. I run a small studio called Computer Lunch here in New York City, and I've been a game developer for about 15 years now, starting off doing Flash games, and then moving into Steam, done a VR game, and now we're mostly focused on free-to-play mobile games on your phone. And I co-own a studio with this lady.
Hi, I'm Kati Noraki. I'm co-founder of Computer Lunch. Before getting into games, I worked in advertising, and my background before that was in fine arts and illustrations. So we'll hopefully get a little bit into that journey as well.
Thank you so much. So everyone's got a very unique path and everyone's got a very unique skill set, which is why we're so excited to see everyone on this stage together. Let's start with a simple question. What drew you to making games? It's a tough thing like we talked about. What was it that compelled you to say, you know what, maybe I should give this a shot?
So for myself, I didn't play games growing up except physical games, so I was not allowed to consume electronic media at all. So books it was, and drawing. So, but as I mentioned, from a focus on drawing, I got really interested in advertising and then in branded content. So when Andrew and I met, he was really into the game scene, and I joined for a lot of the events. So there used to be show and tells with something called the New York Games Forum, which was an amazing way to meet people in the community and to also see what was being created. And exposure to that whetted my appetite to apply some of the stuff that I had already been working on that was more sequential, and making it interactive. And so we started making games pretty much 4 months into meeting.
So I've always loved video games. They're great, but I never thought you could make a game. Like, I would play games all the time, but never said like, oh, I wanted to design games. What got me into games was originally I studied graphic design, and I really wanted to be a freelancer making like party flyers or like rave flyers. This is like 2002, and I thought rave flyers were like the coolest graphic design I'd ever seen. So I really wanted to do that as like at a freelance capacity, and then getting into graphic design like Photoshop. There was this company called Macromedia that had a program called Flash that you could make buttons, like you could do like small animations, or you could click a button and play a sound, and that was really interesting. And I just kept doing that to the point where I got better and better at code and could do a little bit more of it. And then at some point I was like, wait a minute, I know enough to actually like make a simple game. And then that started the long journey of learning a lot about programming and art and eventually game design. But that's what got me into it.
Thanks. So I guess I played a few video games growing up. But like Andrew, I never thought about it as like a possible occupation. I will never forget like walking into the NYU Game Center for the first time in my life on a playtest Thursday or like a Killer Queen tournament night, and just being like what? You can go to school for this, and like you can play games as your homework assignment, and you could be like, oh, I have to play a game for your homework assignment. Like, kids have it so good. But yeah, so my background has very little to do with games. I think I wanted to be an artist, but I had the whole like first generation, the pressure is not is like doctor, lawyer, engineer, like should I do this or that. And so I kind of avoided it. And at a certain point in your life, you're just like, I can't avoid being the person who I want to be. So I was like an English major. I worked in publishing at Oxford U Press for a while. So it was a very different scene, but I worked on like the art dictionary. And at a certain point, I was just like, I don't want to do the dictionary. I want to like be the person making the stuff that the dictionary is about. And so I quit my job cold, and I worked at like a wine marketing place writing about copy about wine, even though I don't drink. At the same time, I was getting involved in baby castles, and I had this friend named Blake Andrews, who is a great game developer, and I met them on like Tumblr in 2014 as like a young 20-year-old, and I'd been writing a lot of DIY music at the time and just freaky music, and they were making freaky games, and they were on this website called Glorious Trainwrecks, and they were like, you want to write like weird music for my weird games? And I was like, sure. And then I got involved in baby castles and like met all these people, including Prush and Laura, and I think baby castles really, specifically when you're talking about the medium of video games, I think baby castles kind of like, for the first time opened my perspective to like the like break the definitions of what video game could mean. And I think for me, I'm a person that's very excited by ideas, and I think having like that kind of like that pathway to looking at games as like a concept making machine or like a place where you could explore ideas was exciting to me. So the fact that it was like this very like malleable, still in flux, like indefinable medium appealed to me. And the fact that there's just like so many parts involved, for better, for worse. There's just like too much going on in a video game, and some of us like to be stressed out by too much going on, and that's a part of it too. So yeah.
So yeah, I also growing up didn't play a lot of video game. I was more of a theater kid actually in high school. Wasn't paying much attention to game until I remember like one day in high school sophomore year, I saw a bunch of my friends gathering around this laptop, playing this small little indie game called Binding of Isaac. Not sure if anyone played it before. It's like a 2D top-down bullet hell roguelike game. The art style has its own vibe. Looks like a small budget indie game. And I remember seeing all my friends like kind of screaming, laughing at that game, and I was like, something just clicked in my brain. I was like, screw theater. That's what I want to do. Like, whatever I was doing, I want people to react to my creation in that way. And of course, later, after I know more about game, I discovered like a lot more game that has much more similarity to theater than that game specifically. But what that game does to me specifically, I feel like is looking at that, I also feel like that's something I can do by myself. It's like something really simple, something. Now I know video games never easy to make, but still, I guess it's the combination of seeing an art form that's doing the thing I want to do in a better way and seeing the possibility of doing it by myself.
What was the question? How did I? I'm kidding. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know. I sort of randomly applied for grad school like 12 years ago or something. Before that, I like made music. I guess I used to write little like critical article things about like World of Warcraft and stuff in like 2005, and they would go on someone's blog and then the blog would vanish in a year or two and whatever. And so when I applied for grad school, I just thought I was going to like write about games. I was like, this particular program is accepting all kinds of different people. Most of the people had never at NYU, this particular grad program at NYU, they were accepting people who had come from many different backgrounds, and it was like you didn't necessarily have to be about making games; it could be anything. So I was like, I'll write about them. That makes sense to me. And I don't know, spent a lot of time learning programming, and I liked the engineering aspect of it. And also, there's something about making like music or film. It's like very daunting, or like there's just so many good movies and there's so many good like albums and things like that, but video games, I was like, video games are they're a little dumb. Like I can do it. I was like, okay, like for something about it just didn't seem that like it was less scary. Also, just I was around a lot of people that were just kind of like jumping in and doing it, and so that was really encouraging. That helped a lot. So I don't know. It really was just this like me randomly applying for grad school and then also finding Baby Castles at the same time and becoming just like a total like life sea change in like 2011. That kind of did it for me. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. We've heard a lot of names: NY Games Forum, Baby Castles, NYU Game Center, Wonderville. There's a thriving community of independent development in New York, and there's even more names that I haven't mentioned right now. But this is all great to hear. I think we've talked about then what made you start, but I want to think about from discovering that you have the capability, the ability to do it, to transitioning into seeing it as a serious practice, right? Like there's that moment where it becomes from a hobby to something a little more serious that, maybe it's part of your life's purpose or, what gives you meaning. So when did that happen for you? And anyone can answer this.
Let's see. Doing it as your life's purpose. Well, ultimately, you have to find a job somewhere. So, like, either you're going to be working on something that's not maybe what you're as passionate about, whether that's art or music or, in my case, games. So trying to figure out like how do I really want to make games. Like, how do I make this into something I can spend all my time doing, or at least most of it? And in New York City, there were a few gaming jobs, but there was not it was still very hard to get a job in game design. And at the time, you could make in Flash, you could make games on your own. So I just wanted to spend all my time making my own games, and learning on my own. But that meant you still have to figure out something for money. So I think as an artist, keeping your expenses low is real key. And in New York City, it's very hard to do that. So moving up here, having a my best friend at the time, we moved up to New York, and we were roommates for a long time, and just trying to kind of keep costs low so you could spend all your time working on art projects. And then, and so now we have a studio where we make the games, and we're still trying. We don't want the studio to go to business, because then we gotta do something else. So like working really, really hard to keep, so we can continue to make art and make games.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that a little bit, mainly because we do collaborate, and we did collaborate, and I always thought of indie games as basically fine arts, meaning we paid to do them, and that sucks, but it just is the reality of it. And so I always wanted health insurance. So I made sure I would always have a full-time job with benefits. But because Andrew and I collaborated on projects, we figured out relatively, and I was always working on projects before I met him too, like other kinds of projects. But we came up with a rhythm where I would have the day job to make sure our bases are covered, but then Andrew would spend more time working on our joint projects. And we did a bunch of those while I was working full-time until we were able to both work full-time at the company. And so it doesn't work unless you find people where you have sort of compatible skill sets and you can make that happen. But for us, it was a pretty deliberate choice, I would say.
Yeah.
The questions from hobby to making.
Hobby to serious. When did that happen?
Yeah, so I guess I could just speak experientially, sequentially. I was working that wine writing job, and then doing things at Baby Castles, and I liked doing it. And I liked doing it. Seriously. Yeah, I think there were a couple of steps for me. The first step was that I think one day when I was there, I met Prush, and Prush, I think we were getting ready for MagFest or something, and then at some point, Prush hit me up and was like, "Do you want to be producer for Pariah Interactive?" And at that time, I was like, "Yeah, of course. Like, I don't want to be working a line job and then making games on the side. It would be great to be producing games and making games on the side." And at that point, I was like, "Oh, like I can use my job to help me get better at my hobby." So that was like one deliberate decision. And yeah, at that time, I'd started collaborating and working in this games collective that was like 9 people. And it was called JRPG Combat Systems, and we did this like it was really fun. We did this like a monthly drop where we like released an album of like prototype systems that anyone could remix. We kind of took like a music beat making model and like converted into games or whatever. It was super fun, but it was also a good time to just like learn about like. And this is a question we ask ourselves all the time, right? Is like, what is your relationship to the craft? Is it just a hobby? Is it just like something that you want to make money off of? Can it be both? If it's money, like, it just fractals into a lot of questions. And then from that collective, 3 of us were like, we are open to the idea of making it commercial or doing things such as client work to sustain ourselves. So out of this collective called JRPG Combat Systems was Common Opera, which is me and 2 other members. And at first we were just like having like a 4-hour meeting every Tuesday night while I was working the Pariah job, and eventually doing some producer work with Andrew. And then eventually we were just like, we were just making sort of like these like art games that we thought like should exist. And I think at some point I was just like, are we open to client work as a group? Like, we always had like a goal of like wanting to make art games, but we were never closed to the money side, meaning like the like what do we need to get there? Like we need to support ourselves. So like we could do client work again, like using your money making job to help you hone your craft and turn it into the thing you ultimately want it to be. So yeah, so eventually like we actually formed an LLC and like we just turned it into a whole company, and then just we basically work on client projects to support our in-house development, and yeah, but it was more just like a let's just try this out kind of a thing in life as life does go, and then it just picked up, and it's like, okay, cool, yeah, I will take this paycheck, I will use it as like a internship, like learning really quickly under the gun kind of a thing, and then it forced us to work better together under certain circumstances, and like take that and apply it to the projects we ultimately want to make. So I guess, yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was like, well, yeah, I need to eat, and like if I can use the thing to eat to like become better at something else that's adjacent to it, why not? Yeah.
So for me, coming from NYU Game Center, I guess at start we all treat game as a serious thing, but that's a different kind of serious compared to how I guess like business or company handles it. So a couple years ago, because of COVID, I went back to China for 1 year and got this internship at this company which is funded by Tencent. So they got money, they got a lot of money, and that means it's super corporate. It's like, and they were doing things serious in a different way, I guess. And I remember at that point I was like, is that the kind of serious that's different from the hobby serious? Then does that mean what I did in school is a hobby serious compared to the business serious? And I guess for me, Pariah is kind of my answer to it, because like that's after that internship, I kind of feel like, yeah, that's not what the thing I want to do when it comes to game design and game development. And I guess I'm trying to find a balance between the kind of dedication to design and creativity, and like, but also something that can make money. And I guess for me, Pariah is now the answer I found. Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Because I mean, when you graduated, you went like all the way into like the industry, and then was like, no, this is. Then you found your home here. I didn't even go that far when I graduated. I started doing client work after graduating because I was like, well, that's a thing that you can do, and I didn't really like making Unity games for other people. I did it for a bit, like not even a year, but. Like, not to get too personal, but during that same year, my dad died of an incurable illness, and he was like a year away from retirement. And I was like, that's not going to be me. I can't like, I have to spend time just doing things that I enjoy doing during that time. I can't really think that much about money. So it's fine. I'll just be in debt for the rest of my life. It's okay. And I haven't really regretted that decision. So after that, I kind of stopped doing games for money, and I started teaching like after school programs, like 8-year-olds and like grade schoolers, and then like eventually like the high school program at NYU, and then I kept, now I'm teaching grad students at NYU, so I just keep getting older. But yeah, I think that like the artist academic path has suited just the way that it makes sense to me, where like my living is earned through teaching classes and stuff, and then I can work on games in my own time. And because it's an art school, you're required to have an art practice, and so the games are my art practice. So yeah, it works out.
I think, yeah, it's super interesting. Everyone's touching on this aspect of money. So let's get into that a little bit, right? The indie game industry, as we know, is pretty financially unforgiving. It can be anyway. So, with your personal projects that you're doing for art or as a solo developer, how do those make your living, or how do you make your living? And what is your, personal business model? Because I think everyone has a different one in this industry. So, yeah, let's talk about it. Whoever wants to start.
So I'll start at the beginning. Kati and I, so we're married, but we also run a studio together. We're both co-owners of Computer Lunch. And when we started dating, we knew we liked collaborating together. So and I'm more of a computer programmer, and Kati's more of an illustrator, art director. So when we initially started dating, we wanted to make children's books, but iPad children's books. So the iPad had been out for about 3 years or so. And
2010.
Like 2010, yes. So a while ago, yeah. Kati came up with ideas for stories and would illustrate everything, and then I would do the like the programming, almost like light game design for like these interactive books. But we would work as every project we do, we're basically working as hard as we can. We're trying to do the best work we've ever done at that point. And we worked on this children's book for maybe 3 or 4 months and put it on the store. And then we get like 20 sales or something. And it's like you spend so much effort in this thing, and it just like. It mostly fails. Like your friends are happy for you, like you can share it and social, and a few people will buy it, but ultimately it's like not a financial success. So we did one of those, then we did another one, and that one did even worse than the first one. So you get really like butthurt when you do like the greatest work you can, and you try as hard as possible, and you put it out into the world, and just no one cares. So dealing with that, and like every time you make a new work, you're like, well, okay, what do I do differently that maybe people will care more about it when it releases? But
yeah, I think we started figuring out how we define success.
yeah.
Right. So as I mentioned before, I never thought that I could quit my day job, but I did want the things to be successful on their own terms. So we realized that we had to do some kind of marketing if we wanted to be on the App Store. And then, 2010, 2012, like it seemed like featuring was the way to go. And so
this is getting featured on the App Store.
Yes.
Yeah, like Apple's like, oh, we like this game, we'll put you on the front page, you're going to get 100,000 downloads. Yeah.
So I then became absolutely fixated on getting featured for the next project we would collaborate on together. And we worked on it as hard as we could. We hired, Andrew was teaching at the time, so we hired interns who also worked as hard as they could. We worked on weekends.
It was like a weekend project, like because you had a full-time job, and then I was teaching. But every weekend we'd meet for a full day and just work on the project. And we did that for almost a year on this game that turned out to be called Mama Hawk.
Right, and Andrew wanted to quit that project many times because he's like, it's done. And I was like, but is it ready to be featured? And he's like, I don't know if it's gonna be featured.
It wasn't my game idea, so it was like Kati's idea. So I was a little less in love with it, but you were really passionate about it. So you went out and found kind of a publishing partner.
Yeah, I was a bitch about it because I really wanted it, right? So we found a partner, and then working with the partner, they wanted us to redesign the entire game because it needed to be monetized. And so for us, in addition to marketing, suddenly we had to confront the fact that the structure is actually part of the success and the monetization, and the publisher wanted to make money off of it. So even if we didn't, we had to actually reckon with it. And so it was very painful, but we did redesign it, and then we launched it, and it did get featured in a lot of areas, like in the world, including my home country, which was very nice. Except it was right when featuring was not as important anymore. So that was the next thing. So it got featured a lot, and like the editors team really loved it. They featured it throughout the year. But it actually didn't turn into a business because the featuring was basically a vanity point at that point. So back to the drawing board, and then...
but we learned a lot of lessons. So from as a studio, we've made about 6 games, and the game she just talked about is probably our 4th game. So we learned, with each one, we learned like new things. And so the most important thing, you do have to make a game that's very fun. So if the game's not good or fun, you're kind of dead on arrival. But outside of that, like the game has to fit well in the market, and then it also has to have some sort of way to make money back. So with each game, we learned a little bit more about that. And with Mama Hawk, we learned a ton. Really, we learned how polished a game has to be. Like, so Kati said we had to redo the game. We'd spent like a year and a half building this prototype, which was like a simple arcade action game, and then to be told like you basically need to build an entire new game, like change everything, like double the amount of work that you had done in the first thing. It was very like demoralizing, like but we also learned like that's kind of the level of polish that is necessary to compete in a commercial market. So it kind of told us how far we had to go. And finally, the game we have now is a game called Cell to Singularity, and this game came out about 5 years ago. It's a game about evolution on life. It's a little like Spore, but with those learnings, we were able to kind of market that game correctly and also make sure it monetized and sold well. So we've had about 20 million downloads for Cell to Singularity, and we've been able to build a studio around that one game where we have about 10 employees here in New York City.
Just real quick, can you talk a little bit more about the business model of Cell to Singularity? And
sure, yeah.
A little bit also about how you scaled from Mama Hawk and maybe even previously to Cells?
Sure. Let's see.
You look like a deer in the headlights. So, as Andrew mentioned, he was used to being a solo dev, but he was used to working with teams when he was doing client work. I was used to running teams when in my previous jobs in advertising, and then later at Dots, where I was studio art director. So both of us were used to collaborating with people. So the first thing we had to do was we had to hire people to help us because we got an indication that Cells was special. So we had friends who played it. You know, like your friends are like, yeah, sure, I'll play it. And then you never hear from them again. This game, we would see them after a week and they had beat the game. And that had not happened before. So we were like, okay, we should probably think about how to make this sustainable. I would be curious if anyone wants to guess what the role was that we hired first that was beyond the two of us.
Well, we had freelancers that helped with like smaller things like writing and a few things, but the first full-time hire had a specific role.
So marketing, we have 2 votes for marketing.
Production,
1 vote. Any other guesses? Project manager. Okay, production, project manager. Social media. Any other guesses? Monetization. QA. All incorrect. Do you want to tell them what it was?
It was customer service. So it's a little bit of a hack because our main writer was also the person that did all the customer service. So Nisa, who's no longer with our studio, she's now at the Disco Elysium studio. But we brought her on full time because we get a lot of emails from fans just being like, hey, I like it. Hey, I have a problem with something. And we try to respond to every single email that we get. But that actually takes a lot of time and a lot of emotional kind of energy. And so we wanted to make sure we had a person that's dedicated to doing that. So like half of Nisa's time in the beginning was really fielding emails from players and making sure if anything goes wrong in the game that they get heard. A lot of apologizing when things like if you delete somebody's save file, they get pretty upset. But then the cool thing with her role is that she was also kind of the head writer, so it kind of kicked off her beginning of a writing career as a game designer. So there's in small studios there can be there's a lot of like busy like grunt work, but there's also opportunities to do something that you might not get in a larger studio.
Yeah, that's incredible. 6 games. Yep. Cells was special. It made it. It's free to play. Check it out. Cell to Singularity. Android, iOS. And Steam. Yeah. Of course. How can we forget? But yeah, I just want to hear from some of the other panelists about how do you make money? Like, how do you pay your bills? How do you eat? How do you do your thing?
I guess I'll just think of, so right now, this past year was the first year we were able to quit all our day jobs and be like a studio with a client. And gratefully, it was one client with enough money to do that. I've definitely had to play like the hustle game where you're working for like 7 different artists with budgets that are really small and they're really picky, and I love those projects too, but it's really hard on your body when you have to do that. Actually, game development is just hard on your body no matter what. But I think I don't know what I feel like what I learned the most was that it's just everything is just easier when you just have one client and you have unbroken focused time. Even as a studio, the fact that we do, there's still so much time where like our focus can easily be broken because of balancing the like our needs versus like the in-house needs versus the client needs. So just like trying to reduce the amount of time you're breaking your focus, I think is almost more important than money sometimes, because time is money. And yeah, so I think that's
So
pretty
yeah,
straightforward.
it's the services model where you're doing
Yeah,
client
we're doing a
work
service.
and then you're making your own games. Are you monetizing your games specifically at Common Opera, or is that something you've done in the past or want to do in the future? Can you talk about that?
No, all our games right now are free, but I feel like in terms of like what our next goal probably is it would be cool to we work for a client because they don't know how to make video games. It would be cool to work closely with a group of people that do know how to make video games. I feel like working with people such as yourselves, where you know how to make a video game. Most importantly, your expectations are like super realistic. Like when you have a client that doesn't know games, they're just like, "Why isn't this done?" It's just too much.
Wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah. Well, what about can't we just ... I just played. We got. Yeah. So Anyway, so where was I going? What was your question? Oh, sorry. So I think it'd be cool if the next client knew a little more about the games, and then ultimately I think we're just trying to build a repertoire of stuff. It's stuff that we've released to like mostly like the festival and conferences circuits, and have gotten into things. And we are also looking at grants, and we're also looking at like exhibition spaces. We're not just looking at, our goals aren't like primarily commercial. We're kind of trying to build a resume such that like if someone wants to give us money, they can trust that we can do that, whether that's through a publisher or like any other means. I think if we could do like a games client next and then a publisher, and while like working ourselves, that's probably our in-house goal. But
Great.
One thing at a time. Yeah.
Cool. So I do still have a daytime job, as I mentioned. I'm a developer here at Pariah. And for me, things a little bit complicated because I'm not U.S. citizen. So I do also need a daytime job to stay here. And yeah, so I'm not currently making money through any of my indie projects. I'm not planning to do that anytime soon. I guess for me, I kind of choose a more like forgiving path for myself, because I want to give myself room and time to think about what I actually want to make, room for making mistakes. Like when there's no financial pressure and timeline pressure when it comes to your own projects, you kind of have a lot more creativity freedom. But also in the meantime, when you are the only standard of a project, it also means like the project can drag really, really long. But yeah, that's basically my answer.
Yeah, that's a great way to learn and figure it out, and kind of get the insight from the industry, and do your own thing at the same time. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've kind of forsaken games for money a little bit. I mean, everything that I've made that is like it's there's a money amount attached to it, and it's on itch.io, it's on Steam or whatever, but it hasn't. The most money that I've made from a game was like winning awards at festivals. The European festivals give you money if you win, by the way. The ones in the US don't. They're just like, thanks for being here. But so I was like, I would joke with friends. It's like we had to just keep applying for like awards, and like that's where the money's that you win on. Yeah, specifically. Also, if you're a solo developer, it's all yours. So I kind of I had to make games for other reasons, and I could teach at NYU. I have all these grad students, and so most of what I'm working on is like experiments in technique or process or other things that I feel like I don't know, I'm like learning something so that I can help them get where they're going, because who knows what they're going to do after they graduate. They could go on to make games, they could go work for a museum or doing, I don't know, some sort of user experience thing for something else, maybe design playgrounds, or there's a million different things you can do with a game design education, and so I don't know. I kind of just I like every aspect of making games, like the audio, visuals, programming, the design, engineering, all that stuff is interesting to me. Most game genres are also interesting to me, so kind of all over the place in that regard. And so yeah, it's more just making games so that I can learn more about the process of making games, so that I am better at my job, which is teaching those things or helping people to learn those things. Yeah. So
I want to also hear from you, Laura, like follow up on that. How does teaching games inform your practice as a solo game maker? And then I want to hear from Luna and Lillian as well on that. How does what you do to make money, like pay the bills, inform your practice as a solo game developer? Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say that it's super nice I can't really spend more than a couple hours in front of a computer before I start getting like restless. So it's nice to not have like a job where I have to look at a computer all the time and then go home and like also do that for fun. It's like the act of like, being in class and stuff is like, it's not a lot of computer time. It's a lot of talking to people. It's a lot of like, especially with grad work, it's a lot of just having intense conversations, like often one-on-one with people about like where they're at and things like that, or like helping them solve their own problems, or like figure out ways to solve those problems. And so that sort of thing, I mean, obviously feeds back into like the stuff that I'm working on, because I'm able to see like so many other people's like directions and the things that they think about or the things that they think are interesting. And it just I don't know, it's like how you have like shower ideas or like going on a walk or something like that. It's like that, but like 20 of those at the same time, like all day. And then you can just sit down and you're like, you work on your own thing. And it all just kind of like tumbles out in an interesting way. So yeah, it's like directly feeds back into working on something. I think it's a lot more, oftentimes conversations with people are just feel a lot more valuable than like sitting in front of your laptop and just pounding away and hoping the answer will just like work out. So.
Yeah. Let's hear from Luna, then Lillian. I have then one more question for everybody, and then we can open it up to the audience for Q&A.
Cool. I guess for me, working here at Pariah, I guess there are two aspects. One is like on the technical side, we do game development, but we also do a lot of projects that are not so much like a game. It's more like a AR or VR experience. That's something shown in the museum or stuff like that. And so you got to learn new skills, and you are kind of being paid to do that, which is always amazing. And I guess another aspect is like coming out from Game Center. We talk a lot about games in Game Center, but what we don't talk about that much is how to actually make a commercially success game. I guess that's something hard to taught you. But yeah, working here, seeing how Thousand Desk grows on the production and the marketing sides is like a really special experience for me. It's kind of my first time experience, like how to run the company, and I see face and project every day doing the production, doing the marketing, and I'm probably not gonna use those knowledge anytime soon, but it's always good to keep those in mind. It almost feels like attending a second school for like game making and game developing.
Rad, yeah. Let's hear from Lillian.
Yeah. I guess there are a few layers of this for me. When I was working at Pariah as a producer, and when I have worked at Cells as a producer for some of the events, for me, I think it's very important, especially, I'm gathering my thoughts. So like the collective is 3 of us, right? And we know each other, we know how to work together, and on the things we've done. But I think it's always important to have some sort of outside perspective, influence. That's why you go to school, that's why you go to church, that's why you join a club, blah, blah, blah. And like, I feel like when I was working at Pariah and at Cells, I was always like we're making the game, right? But I'm always hyper aware of like what the process is, because like everyone does it differently. Every project has different needs, and I tried to like tune into to process as a means of building experience, right? Like experience is like that intangible wisdom that you just gain after you mess up 1,000 times in like 5 different situations. Like you want to put yourself in, like for me, I was trying to put myself into many different kinds of situations and see like, oh, how do you solve this kind of production problem? How do you move something like this forward? If something isn't working, like what is the pain point? And I think, yeah, but of course I was in these roles as a producer, right? So it's like that really helps give structure to something like a collective, where before it was kind of just like we're just friends, like remixing off of each other's things, but being like, okay, like I've thought about like what a more formal art brief discussion might look like, even though we're friends. Like there's a reason why this is a formal discussion. Like let's have it. So that was like one thing I learned from my like day jobs while I had one, and then from like the client perspective, I think like they put you in situations where you usually know most of the information but not all of it, so you're kind of forced into like working and trying to learn these new sort of techniques or just skill sets you've never dealt with before because you've always made pixel games as a collective or whatever. And like we don't want to make that kind of game forever. We want to make whatever, we want to be able to improve our skills. So the client projects throw us into learning that way. But it also, again, to me, I think it's very important, like threw us into a situation where we had to think about process very carefully. And like even on Fridays we have these like free flow Fridays, which are born out of Pariah. It's kind of like a day where we kind of have like these long meetings where we kind of just drop the like details and the bugs and whatever, and we just talk about like big picture vibes. How are you feeling? Does this make sense? Did we lose track of our pillars? Like what are our big term dreams and things like that. I feel like quite often, you have to upkeep, your room gets dirty, it gets dusty. Your relationships with your closest people sometimes have like moments where they're downs and they're highs or whatever. And just like, I think like learning a lot about process. Part of I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I think this is important, which is that part of process is like constantly like reevaluating your relationship to each other and your relationship to your craft, and like have you lost sight of certain things. And I think that the client projects have really helped us develop a common vocabulary for when we need to speak about something. And so, for example, I could be like, oh, the problem that's happening here with these art directions on this like screen here is something conceptually similar to like this in-house project problem that we have, for example. So, yeah, I think I used to think I was like more of an academic type, just writing 80-page papers about Victorian novels and stuff like that. But just doing more all the time is just informative. So if you're doing more stuff outside of it, it informs the thing that you're trying to make yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's really insightful. Well said, all of you.
Yeah.
I have one more question for everyone, and then we can open it up. Which is, let's take a trip down memory lane. Imagine yourself as a younger version of yourself before you got deep in the games industry, this hellhole, and think about what advice would you give yourself if you could right now.
So I'm going to share something that I usually tell people on my teams. I work primarily with visual creatives, so tech artists, animators, riggers, illustrators, UI designers, those kinds of people. And they get really focused on the career path that they're on, which is great. But life is long, and if you're 22, you have no idea how long is, because you think that 10 years is infinitely far away, but then it comes and it goes, and you are still on a journey. So the advice I would give is to not get too hung up on the thing you want in front of you right now, because 10 years, 15 years down the road, you might find yourself working on a thing that doesn't even exist yet right now. So just keep learning, one foot in front of the other, and as you evolve, the other stuff will come. So don't worry about becoming amazing at UX or something like that.
I guess if I could go back in time and tell myself something, is that? Or no, we're
So
not going back
you're
in time.
here right
Okay.
now, but you're talking to your younger self, who is in the past still.
Okay, they're in the past. Okay. So I can give them information about the future.
Well, let's
And
not
then-
break
Okay.
time space continuum.
Okay. I
but,
can't give them
you know.
like tips like make Flappy Birds or make sure to make Wordle or something like. Because we were talking about this on the way here, but the idea that like as an indie, you're if you want to find success, you have to take a lot more risks or a different type of risks than maybe bigger studios. And a lot of the risks might be you might be trying a brand new game mechanic that hasn't been proven. That a larger studio, it might be too risky for them to try. Like they don't know if it's a proven mechanic. So an indie studio can try something new that isn't proven, but at the same time they might fail with that. So if I could pass more information about what would be popular in the future, like if I could know what would be popular in 6 months or a year, it's like, okay, because if I'm going to spend 2 years making a game, I want to make sure like that genre or that style of game is people actually like it. So you're almost trying to like, you're kind of betting on the future. Like you think, and you should, like you're playing a lot of games, so you should know what is fun or like what is new if you're just keeping up with everything and playing it. But you're making a bet on the future that it's going to be fun or popular. Because a lot of times they choose to make something and it turns out no one plays that genre anymore, and there's something new that just popped in and it's fun.
So what's
So
your advice?
my advice, well, if I would tell myself what that would be, I don't know. Okay.
Make something popular.
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Sorry, my thinking takes some time. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I can go. Yeah, I guess for me, something I want to say to myself is like, focus more on the things you want to say instead of a specific things you want to make. Because I feel like looking back at a lot of projects I did at school, I remember like a lot of time I just say to myself, like, I want to make a rhythm game, I want to make a 3D platformer, I want to make this, I want to make that. But then at the same time, I don't think about like why I want to make it, or is what I want to make has to be a rhythm game. Like, I want to make a rhythm game, but why it has to be a rhythm game? What's the deeper meaning behind it? And the thing is, like, when you first get into game development, especially like when you are young, you are not gonna make the game you want to make. You are gonna make a janky, buggy thing, and so like basically the game is not gonna be perfect. And if you have nothing to say with it, it's kind of like a nothing. It's kind of like a box that's not pretty, and it's also inside of it's empty. So yeah, I just want to say to my younger self, think harder, think deeper, and regardless of your technical skill, if you have a really solid point you want to say with the projects, it can stand regardless of your technical skill. And I guess another point I want to say to my younger self is like, you're gonna hear this so much in the next 4 years of your life when you are in college, but I still gonna tell you, because you are not doing it, is go into more playtest. Just let people play your game, don't be intimidated. Talk to people, talk to other developer, talk to other playtester, go to events, hang out with people, know people in the community. That's essential. I know you are not doing it in the next 4 years, but hey, just a piece of advice from future you.
Did you think of something?
Yeah, I can. Do you want to? Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of echoing your last sentiment there, which was just, it's something that I didn't do when I was doing like music stuff. And it just kind of felt isolating. It's like, and I feel like everyone's had that thing when they make something and it's like, what do I do now? You put it on the internet and you're just like, okay, it's in the garbage now. And I think the thing that I made a conscious decision to change when I started doing game stuff was just, you just show up more. You just go hang out with people. If someone's having an event, you just go. If someone's having a birthday party, you should go. If it's anything, and it doesn't matter. Like sometimes, like maybe social anxiety gets in the way, or like you feel tired or something. But you can work at that and get through it, and just it's always just a good idea to just show up. And it's less about like networking than just like those are your people. I don't know. Like the internet is like not real. It feels like you're making genuine connections over the internet, but they can evaporate so quickly. Social service, just like a social network or whatever, just like changes some things, and now you've just lost it. It's like a kind of social connection that's just a bit too like volatile. You kind of just need to actually show up for people. So that is, something that I think is a good thing.
Yeah, let's hear from Lillian, and we'll open it up for questions.
I think I'm pretty good at this because I'm a pessimist, but I would just enforce to my younger self like a few things about expectations. One is like your dream game is never going to be your entry game. It'll probably be like if you're like hung up on your second game, just tell yourself you're gonna make like 7 more games. Like your second game is gonna be a blip in the history. Just get it done because it's good to get things done. So then the other thing is like you're gonna be depressed if your project's not done. You're also gonna be depressed if your project is done. So like that's just another thing. What's the first thing I said? Sorry, I have such bad focus attention. The other thing, so maybe there's something else in terms of expectation. What was it? I don't know.
Depressed if it's done, depressed if it's not done.
I can't think of it right now, but then the other thing. So the other thing I would tell myself is like, I would get very this is more telling about myself, and like maybe some people feel this way, but I feel very discouraged about personal skill level, like technicality and like polish and this and that. But then I realized like when it comes to this like kind of playing field, that's only like a very specific percentage of the entire package. So it's of course you need to focus and sit down and put your butt in the seat and like do the thing, but also like there's a lot more to game development than just actually the code and the arts and the lines and Photoshop and this and that. There's like you got to think about your mental health, you got to think about like the process, you got to think about
customer service.
You got to think about customer service. Yeah, exactly. So so I think when the first time I hear something like the publisher gives like a lot of the money to the marketing, it's just like that's because there's more, and that's on like a company scale wide, right? But like also in just yourself, like the technical skill is just a certain percentage, so don't be so discouraged and say like, I can't do this if I'm not the best coder, my shader, blah blah blah, working forever and this and that. So that, and then the other thing I would tell myself is, again, this is probably more telling myself, it is worth it to invest in a little more expensive, higher quality like things, so that I just had like a MacBook with like the beach ball of doom until I was like 27, and then I like got a working computer, and then I was like, oh, like what am I doing? Like I just couldn't like make a game for like a year because I just didn't want to put down the money to like do this, or like I don't know, get a good chair. Like it's I used to think like, oh, like if you can't make a game under like the most like rotten circumstances, you're not getting the next computer till you make that game or something. But then just having the faith like, yeah, like I'm gonna make a game no matter what. The other option is to just work for some dude that I don't care about. Like invest in something good for yourself because you're worth it, and it's gonna clear up obstacles for you in the long run. I think that's something recent to me. It's like, if you can get rid of those obstacles and it seems like an investment, do it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, everyone. I do want to open up to questions. We have a few minutes, so who has a question? Show of hands. Okay, you right there? Go ahead. Yeah. I'll repeat it back in the mic.
So, in between where you are now and maybe around when you finish college and stuff, there were a lot more responsibilities than just making games, like, or just learning how to make games, or get a job or an education or stuff like that. So how did you find the discipline to keep learning more about games and what it takes to make games while juggling other responsibilities?
So the question is, while you have other responsibilities floating around you, how do you find the discipline and focus to actually do the thing, make the game?
Graduated last.
Oh, okay. I can take it. Yeah, I graduated last, I guess. I don't know. I guess in terms of how you learn new stuff, I guess you learn that stuff also through doing your jobs. And for me, it's like working in a small studio that or just working in an industrial environment. It's constantly like keep me on my toe. And actually practicing things you learn from school in the industry, you realize things are a little bit different from what you learn at school, and you just keep adapting to new stuff. Like what you learn in the past allow you to like keep learning in the future. That's kind of the feeling. Other responsibility other than making game, I guess I don't really have much other responsibility other than making game at this point. So yeah, you also get into new hobbies, do new stuff, and find free time to do those stuff. It's like, yeah, as Kathy mentioned before, like life is a really long journey. You maybe end up in a career or something years later that you don't even know it exists right now. So just be open to other stuff in your life and do your job, practice the thing you want to learn, get into new things you are interested to, and see how it goes, I guess.
I know both of you had a question there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in the computer lunch team kind of touched on this a little bit, like in the world of game development where things can take a very long time, trends can change very quickly. I'm just wondering how you all balance this relationship between keeping an eye on trends, following trends, trying to make sure that something is going to succeed in the market versus taking risks. And I don't know, just maybe what the mental process is like when it takes a long time to make a game and it feels like a game that you were making may not hit the mark because a trend has changed the volume.
Just to repeat the question for those tuned in, games take a long time to make, trends change. How do you manage that? You know, like hitting the market at the right time at the moment.
Yeah, I think we look at a lot of other examples, like just other just seeing what other people are doing, what are other people making, and what is succeeding, what's failing, what's connecting with an audience. Our game now, Cell to Singularity, has been in development for about 5 years. It's been out for 5 years. So normally a game, it comes out, it hits, and then it kind of it's popular for a little while, then it dies off. So part of it's like, how do we keep this game alive? And we had a lot of examples of what other games did. Kati was working at the studio Two Dots, which is a mobile game studio in the city, and they had a lot of examples of like they added different events in the game, they added different game modes. So we, in our own game, we had to modify that to fit our universe, but well, initially our game was about the evolution of life on Earth, which follows like cellular life to human beings and then to the technological singularity. But all our fans were asking for like dinosaurs. They want dinosaurs in the game. So our fans were asking for it, and my other game dev friends, they were like, "Oh, are you going to do another game? Like this one's done good. Do you just want to make another game?" And I think if I was earlier on in my career, I probably would have made another game because I would have said like, "Oh, I'm this one's done. I want to move on to a new concept, a new game mechanic." But because we had basically failed a lot before, this is the first time we tasted any success. So we were just like, we're gonna hold on to this and not let go of it. So when our fans asked for dinosaurs, we were just like, yeah, whatever you guys want. We'll just tell us what to make and we'll make it. And we did that with dinosaurs, and then we did an outer space expansion, and now we're following what a lot of live service games are doing, which is essentially just making more content that uses the same game mechanic and just trying to keep it interesting for people, giving people a reason to open up the game every week.
And social features.
And social features, yeah. But staying in that same, yeah.
Yeah, just real quickly, because we do talk about this a lot, right? And Andrew mentioned that indie studios can take more risk. So if you look at a new game, so I worked on the new games team at Dots, and it's very painful because a lot of things you love get killed all the time, right, by reality. So indie studios are like those new games teams because they can't compete in a red ocean, right? So they have to bring something to the table, and they have to find a place where it's at least purple but hopefully blue. And so you try technology, you try to glue this idea to that idea, and you make experiments. And then you, as Andrew said, like, you look at what else is happening. The other thing is, for us here, I think everyone on this panel has in common that we are parts of communities, and looking at what your peers are doing and not becoming lazy about only focusing on your own project and your own brilliant ideas is really important. So being humble about it and sort of really letting the evidence that you see sort of permeate into your decisions.
Yeah, just to talk in communities, like we brought up Baby Castles, which was a big art gallery game space here. But one, I noticed I was playing. So as you get older, you may play less video games because you don't have time, or you got to work on your own work, and that's okay. But you do lose sight of like the current references, like the most popular styles. So at Baby Castles, JP and myself had a video game of the month club where we just play whatever the new hot game was. And so I got to play a lot of games that I normally wouldn't have checked out. And Undertale was one of these games that had come out, and another one was Doki Doki Literature Club, and we did Doki Doki Literature Club, and more people showed up to that game of the month club than any other game. We had a few people cosplay as Monica, but seeing that game and then understanding like, oh, people like there's like a reset mechanic that kind of flips the script, and seeing that was a really and Undertale did it also. So incorporating some of that into, like, seeing that that's a trend in games as a whole at the time, and trying to let that inform what you're working on.
And you put it in.
And so we added some of that into our game. So being part of the bigger trends.
Great. Well, this is about all the time we have. But like, we will all just mingle and chat now. And I would encourage everyone to go to the restaurant next door, Dashi. They've opened it up for us. They're also closing down soon in a couple months, and it's their closing party tonight, starting at 8. But yeah, let's hang. I think you can get to know the panelists, and yeah, thank you so much for coming again.
Thank you.